you, Jenny, for coming today. It looks as though a few people are still out in their gardens, but may perhaps join us. Um, I'm particularly keen on this subject because it's amongst my cabinet responsibilities in Monmouthshire, where so I see firsthand the challenges of managing to provide healthy food that children will eat on a very tight budget, and starting to, put in more local food, work with farmers more closely, and really balance all of those challenges. So very pleased to welcome you, Jenny, and thank you for taking time out of your weekend to talk to us about school meals.
Okay, so shall I just give you an introduction and then we can have a Q&A? So I represent Cardiff Central, but food is one of the things I talk about a lot because I think it's really important, and I think it's a main driver of the sorry state of the nation's health. We are what we eat, and 2/3 of households never cook from scratch. As a result of that, they're eating a load of ultra-processed ingredients, which you can find on the packet if you happen to have your glasses on. But nobody really talks about it, and it certainly isn't talked about enough. But diet-related disease is on the verge of becoming the main cause of early death. It's only just below smoking. It may have passed it already, but there's always a delay, as you know, I'm sure, in identifying exactly what's going on statistically. The Free School Meals for All Primary Schools project arose out of the cooperation agreement between the Welsh Labour government, and then led by Mark Drakeford, and Plaid Cymru, because in order to govern, you can survive on 30 votes out of 60, but in order to govern and make sure that the effort you're putting into legislation and your budget preparation, you need to have some security of being able to get your budget passed and do some of the things that are important. So this was the most important thing that came out of it, in my view, as something I would have loved to do, but it took that push from Plaid to get it mainstreamed into Welsh Labour's programme. So it's obviously taken a couple of years to roll it out completely, but because it does take time, I absolutely acknowledge the challenges around building up what was in danger of becoming a minority service for poor children, plus a few others. It was in danger of dying a death just because not enough attention was put on it. And in secondary school, it remains a bit of a disaster, but we can come back to that later if we want to. So over the last 2 years, schools have gradually, starting with the very youngest children and then building up to the oldest children. So since last September, every child in primary school is offered the opportunity to have a hot lunch. You can't force people to take it up. And there is an inverse care law going on, in that the poorest schools tend to be the ones with the lowest take-up. But that's not published figures, but it's information I pick up from different people who are round the table with the Welsh Government on this subject. So there's a lot to do on that still, because the packed lunches that children are sent with are a complete car crash. I think it's less than 2% of them actually meet even the inadequate healthy eating guidelines that we've got. And most, if you've ever seen children's lunchbox, it tends to consist of, if you're lucky, a piece of fruit, possibly a sandwich made with ultra-processed bread, and more often, I'm afraid, it consists of biscuits and sweets and a sugary drink, because that's what poor families can afford and haven't thought about other ways of approaching it. It is extremely rare that you see vegetables in packed lunches. So the program's very important, but there remains a great deal of work to do on it in terms of our bigger ambitions, which is to use the Public Procurement Act, the Social Partnership and Public Procurement Act, to drive up the ingredients in school food that can be sourced locally. And there's a considerable tussle here with the food industry, who dominate the food distribution system across the country, as well as in school food. You know, don't be amazed on that. They are the dominant players. We can't do a great deal about that. It requires Wes Streeting or somebody else to put a tax on ultra-processed ingredients in order to then cross-subsidise fresh fruit and veg. But we're waiting for it. We wouldn't be able to do that in Wales, simply because they would slaughter us. It was too small a market. Anyway, there has been a bit of improvement because there's been obviously more attention paid to it, but there's still a lot of work to do on ensuring that the people who prepare food for school meals know what to do with the ingredients in front of them to make a tasty meal. And obviously at the moment there has to be choices, including a vegetarian option, and I think two main meals. Plus there's always the standby of a baked potato with some filling or other. Nothing wrong with that, but you don't really want to be having that every single day. So the people in the forefront on this are Carmarthenshire and Monmouthshire. And as Sarah's here, obviously she'll be able to fill in on some of the detail. But and let me just talk about Carmarthenshire first. When we had a presentation in the Senedd last month by LACER, which means the Local Authority Catering Association, they are definitely part of the food industry. Definitely resistant to removing ultra-processed ingredients from their food. But this is, this is the battle we have. Anyway, they laid on their best, as you'd expect, food for members to taste. And Carmarthenshire, well, I remember picking up this wonderful salad, which included lots of winter salads, which not lettuce as such, because it was a bit early for that, but other veggies that you can grow all year round. And I said, oh, this is amazing. I don't think we get that in Cardiff. And she said, well, no, I'm from Carmarthenshire. And Carmarthenshire has, because it obviously has a plentiful supply of different farmers who are doing vegetables as well as meat and dairy production. They have managed to get somebody to grow all these salads in covered, what are they called, polytunnels, sufficient to cover the whole of Carmarthenshire schools, which is fabulous, really fabulous. And that's a really nutritious source of food, and it was very fresh. It was just as good as anything you might buy in a farmer's market. But of course, that is not what the majority of local authorities are doing. I know that Monmouthshire is working on that sort of thing because it takes time, obviously, to encourage suppliers to build up enough production to make it worth their while. But there's been lots of conversation about how we break down procurement into bite-sized chunks so that people can start small and then build up. One of my good friends in the NFU has always said, we will always grow whatever there's a market for. And if you can guarantee us a market, we'll grow for it. And I think she means that. And I think it's really, partly this is down to the public procurement departments of local authorities to be much clearer about how many tons of X they want, in a given month. Clearly, what should be happening is that the food should be seasonal. So you wouldn't be serving the same food in December that you would be serving in June. So it's a work in progress. But I have to say, there's still lots of things that make you pull in your teeth. So, for example, I happen to know that Monmouthshire is actually the only local authority in Wales, as far as I'm aware, that is serving red tractor chicken. You may have seen in the local press that at one point Monmouthshire was horrified to learn that they had been provided with Thai chicken. So chicken from Thailand, with all the carbon miles involved in that, which obviously was against Monmouthshire's ambitions to reduce their carbon emissions in everything they're doing. They still occasionally get sent Thai chicken by Castle Howell. But one of the reasons that the default is the Thai chicken is that is what every other local authority, to my knowledge, is serving up. But parents don't know that. Obviously, children wouldn't understand what that meant. But it does mean that there are some lots of ethical issues that in relation to the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. But also there's an insecurity of supplies because Thailand's a very long way away and the world is in a very insecure place. So you can see that it's really complicated. I started this campaign when my own children were quite small in the 1990s, and there were things like turkey Twizzlers and smiley faces. Some of you are nodding. They're absolutely appalling things, absolutely dripping with fat and nothing nutritional whatsoever. We have managed to get them banned, but we still have lots of ingredients that are not sufficiently fresh, really. And it's partly because it's quite complicated cooking for large numbers of people who all want to be served in quite a short space of time. But steaming green vegetables makes them a hell of a lot more nutritious than putting them in boiling water, where you might as well be drinking the water. So there's lots to do, but there's a great deal more that could be done if we invested more in school meals as a political project, because we think it's important to feed the next generation properly. So I think that is something that Professor Kevin Morgan has written about in his book that was published in January called Serving the Public. And he looked at three things: school meals, foods in hospitals. You'd think it would be a good idea to feed people nourishing food, so to get them out of hospital, and also food in prisons. So these are this is where the public procurement takes place. This is where we feed these three different groups of people out of the public purse. The most interesting thing for me, one of the most interesting things for me, is that in his book he talks about an experiment that was done in a young offenders institution in Aylesbury. in about 20 years ago, where they did a proper randomized control trial. Clearly, none of these people were going anywhere. And they gave half of them a nutritional supplement. They couldn't, and then half of them a placebo. They obviously wouldn't have been able to give half of them fresh veg suddenly, because then you wouldn't have been able to, then they'd all have been demanding fresh veg. So they did it as a control trial so that the young people didn't know which group they were in. But the results were astonishing, because there was a 38% decrease in violence in the most violent prisoners. And I've raised this a couple of times in the Senate, because there is a serious problem in our particularly in our secondary schools, about violence and poor behaviour. And, for some teachers, it's become a really significant problem for their own safety, as well as to, the challenge around keeping all of the students on site safe. So there is going to be a seminar in May to discuss behaviour. So that'll be with all the head teachers. And I do hope they discuss food, because I can tell you that the food in the secondary schools is a complete car crash. It's no better than what you get in McDonald's or places like that, because they are deliberately encouraging people to buy things that they can make the most money out of. So things like, which shouldn't even be on the agenda, things like muffins, or cupcakes. Bottled water is one of the things I most object to. Clearly, there should be tap water readily available on the tables with cups, so that everybody gets to drink. But that there is no place for these sugary drinks or anything like that. That they've got rid of most of the sugary drinks, but they're still trying to make money out of these children, some of whom come from extremely poor households. So that's definitely a fight for another day. I suppose the other complex issue is around children arrive in school having been fed whatever it is their parents have fed them. And in some households, that will not be a healthy, balanced diet. And they may have had an extremely limited diet. And my understanding is that, children, if you don't give children a variety of tastes before they're 2, it's much more difficult to introduce new foods to them. They do become picky at age 2. I can definitely vouch for that. But, they do revert back to, most of them, to eating normal food. So I think that is quite a challenge. And some children can get very anxious about it. And the only way forward is to engage children in the whole process by helping them taste food. I went to a school in Hackney a few years ago, where they laid out on the tables a tray of crudité, which is raw vegetables cut up with hummus, so you could taste it as you wanted. There was no pressure. It wasn't the main meal you were getting, but it enabled you to taste these foods. And there's all sorts of things you can do, both in the classroom and in a dining hall, to educate children on encouraging them to try new tastes. But certainly my personal experience in schools is where, fruit is being handed out. A lot of children have no knowledge of the wide range of foods, of fruit that we can get. Things like kiwis, which are actually very, very nutritious in terms of vitamin C. They look expensive, but I think that you're getting a lot of vitamin C for your money. And most children have never seen one, because it's not considered to be something that we should spend our money on a burger instead. So lots that I could talk about. I think particularly around the need to have basic cookery lessons for the whole community, because, as I say, 2/3 of the community absolutely have no idea how you prepare food, which to me is one of the drivers of these food banks. It's not the only one, but certainly if you don't know how to manage food, 38% of all food is thrown away, never gets eaten. So if we want to reduce our carbon emissions from food, that is one very obvious thing we've got to be able to do. So, Sarah, shall I stop there and we can have a discussion? Because I've probably gone on for a while.